Happy Black Mold Friday. Welcome. I'm Dr. Diana, the Detox Doc, and while most people are talking about saving money today, we are talking about saving lives with life-changing medical mold information that the medical system is neglecting, and we are bringing light to today. So I'm going to be joined by mold assessors soon, but glad to see you all here. So we're just going to be talking about a variety of topics related to mold. So as you guys know, whenever you go to the doctor, normally they consider bacteria and viruses, but fungi or mold are often not even on the list of things that can be causing your symptoms. But we know in our communities that mold is causing health symptoms for millions of people. So this is, super important topic, and we're really happy to be discussing it tonight. So we're gonna get mold assessor in here if possible. Happy Black Mold Friday. Absolutely. Has a law degree in environmental law. He is based in Florida, but he does virtual and travel
Hello.
all over. And he is the owner of Mold Assessor and
Hi.
Mold Testing. So welcome.
Hi, Dr. Di. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Wonderful. Great to see you. Glad to be
Awesome.
doing this again.
Yes,
Round
yes.
two.
Yep, absolutely. For those of you who don't know, we made up this term Black Mold Friday last year, and it stuck. So it will never go away. So, you
Yeah.
know, I was talking with you earlier about how it's the holidays and people are traveling and getting more and more mold exposures, and how I was talking to somebody who said that even though their family member found mold in their house, that they were still going to host, and everyone was going to be exposed to mold because people don't really think much of it still. They're like, oh, this is going to be fine, we're still going to have Thanksgiving here. And uh I don't know what happened with that, but it's sad.
Yeah. I see very, very often, the homes that people are living in and raising their kids in general, or just some of them are just in really bad shape. And I think a lot of people just don't understand what the mold is because, especially in Florida, there's mold everywhere. So people don't really think a lot about it. But especially the holiday times, a lot of people are coming down to places like Florida where it's
True.
not too cold right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but also, up north, we see a lot of mold issues up north, especially when you have a very harsh winter.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's a big thing for people to protect their guests. Usually with a short-term exposure, there's maybe less overall effect, but sensitive people are going to feel it right away.
True. Yeah. It all depends on, several factors, especially if you're already dealing with mold and mycotoxins, because if you have mold colonizing you, for example, then you go to a place that has mold, then the mold inside of you will react with that mold and put off more mycotoxins, which is kind of crazy to think about, but it very much does happen whenever you hit a new mold exposure and you're already dealing with mold, especially colonization. So you definitely can become like a mold dog. So
Yep, definitely. And we see it all the time, like a lot of people don't even know they're sensitive, but once you get into that environment where all of a sudden it's very moldy, that's we want to avoid that. So everyone should strive to have a home that has clean filtered air and clean surfaces, a dry home.
true,
um,
yeah. I mean, it's so, I don't think many people, and I didn't think about this until getting into the field, really think about their air filters and their HVAC system at all. They're just like, oh, it's gonna maintain itself, right? But it really doesn't.
mhm.
So, and I think that also underscores the importance of, like we talk about often, the low mold lifestyle, and just having a reserve, having a resilient gut, having our immune systems boosted up when we go into any travel or any new exposures. For example, just to make sure that our livers are all ready to take on whatever may come our way in any
Mhm.
environment. flying or driving or wherever. So gotta love the holidays. So I know you were talking a lot about how the bigger the home is, the more mold you see, right?
Yeah, and I think it's super important. Obviously, I think this mold issue affects lower income people more in general, but the other side of the spectrum, which is wealthier people, bigger houses, things like that, they actually tend to have bigger mold issues. Where I don't know if you've noticed with your clients or if you get into their finances, but I know that a lot of the bigger homes and the wealthier clients I've had, they had more health issues because there's more exposure. At the same time, you really don't see it because the home is relatively kept clean. But like the AC units and the things that need real deal maintenance, especially in the bigger homes, it's just a harder situation.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so important because people get really defensive, understandably. And I used to be like that. Oh, I keep my house clean. It's like it's not a matter of dirty versus clean. You can clean your house all the time and still have molds everywhere, behind the walls. Like it's not going to be in front of your face if you do regular maintenance, but it could be anywhere else. So,
Yeah, and the air quality issue is a huge part of this. And if you think about it, you think about air pollution and all the different stuff that's in our air. You don't see that with your eyes. It's
right.
still something you're exposed to. But in your home, we tend to see a higher level of these pollutants, these airborne mold spores and all that. So it's really important to understand that your home's not clean unless it's clean like on a microscopic level, which
Hmm.
means you're more than just dusting, but you're actually getting in and like scrubbing essentially and disturbing.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, and I think because I know you post a lot about how the indoor counts being higher than the outdoor counts, right? And that's what I tell people because whenever we don't want to think about like mold free because it's not going to be mold free, but having it be diluted to the same extent as outdoors because mold is a part of the ecosystem. We respect mold. It's doing its job. It's decomposing things.
Mhm.
It definitely has an important job in the ecosystem, but we want to make sure that the concentration, right? The counts.
Yeah, it's super important, and I think people focus on mycotoxins, which are super important, or people will focus only on spores and ignore mycotoxins, or there's so many things that play in. Like if you're breathing in a high number of spores, whether you whatever kind of mold it is, you're probably going to have an issue because you're breathing in things that, you talk about colonization, like these spores can actually grow in your body into mold. So maybe there's no mycotoxins in your environment, but if you have these spores that are basically mold seeds, which can get into your body, spores are just as important. And fungal fragments, hyphal
Mhm.
fragments, which are part of like the hyphae roots of the mold, these are even smaller and these can go deeper into your lungs and your sacs and whatnot that are in there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and that's uh yeah, the fungal fragments and the hyphae and the mycelium. There's a whole network, right, of fungus underneath the outdoor, but we don't want it decomposing us. So, yeah.
yeah, I saw one of those oddly satisfying videos or whatever. You have the loaf of bread that has the mold on it, and they say some people are cutting off the moldy slice and then continuing, but the idea is not only is there spores and toxins, but you're only seeing the body of the mold on the surface. Underneath, there's roots that can be throughout that loaf of bread,
Yeah, so
and you'll never see it.
did they show you like under the microscope or something?
Well, they kind of explained it, not in that video,
Okay.
but it's so hard to prove at the end of the day is a loaf truly clean or not. But why would you risk,
But again, I mean, I don't recommend regular bread to anyone either. So, grain-free bread for the win.
Yeah.
Definitely, that it gets the texture done, but it's not toxic. So toxic grains. But yeah, and cheese definitely a good point. I think that's hotly debated how much you have to cut off of a cheese, but if you see mold anywhere, then you can pretty much say that it's contaminated. So And yeah, I mean, as we were talking about earlier, mold in indoor environments, very, very important. Mold is also found in foods and drink, unfortunately, coffee, anything like beans. Those, are the coffee beans that are stored and they can easily grow mold or have mycotoxin contamination. So any kind of grain, corn is really bad for aflatoxin, which can cause liver cancer and other things. And yeah, cheeses, lots of different foods can be contaminated with mold. But yeah, coffee is one of the big ones. So yeah,
And shout
what?
out to the active comment section, by the way. Hopefully, we'll be
Absolutely,
answering
guys.
some questions. Definitely have to shout out Ted, the Mold
Yes.
Lady, True Organic, Long Island Resto, all the friends that are here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what coffee substitute would you recommend? So, I still do coffee, but clean coffee. There's a few different clean coffees, and then also there are some teas that are tested for toxins. You just want to make sure whatever brand is tested for toxins. So, oh yeah, and EMFs, 5G, and Wi-Fi everywhere stimulating growth. Very interesting. Yeah, that's so true. Uh, for sure it stimulates mold growth. Again, it's hard to prove exactly how, right? Like on a petri dish test, but it definitely does make mold put off more mycotoxins. The data say 70% more. I don't know, but how that can be measured accurately, but you know.
Yeah, I see a lot of people in the mold community. They're very worried about being near 5G towers and that sort of thing now. And I think that's, perfectly fine up to preference. But I think there should be a bigger focus on understanding moisture in every climate, every kind of building, because at the end of the day, if the 5G affects it, that's one thing. But what's causing that mold in the first place
Mhm.
is a moisture problem. The mold needs moisture, and it's going to need some kind of organic material.
Yep.
Um, and you see a question here from Eye for Details. Great name, by the way. What about old mold? Is it once it's dried? Is it a health concern? Um, I'm sure you don't want to be exposed to old mold in any kind of medical sense, obviously, but that brings up the question, is there a moisture issue that was fixed? Or is it just dry right now, but it's going to be wet in the rainy or snow season? Absolutely. There's even people saying that old mold is still producing mycotoxins and spores, and if it's dried out, maybe now it's much easier to become airborne in your house. So you still
Mm.
want to treat it exactly the same.
Yeah, and it can be reactivated, right? Given the right conditions.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about whatever's there, if it's a whole pile of spores, these spores, they're not really alive. They can last really, really long time in crazy conditions. And if it gets that right moisture, it's going to grow. And in somewhere like Florida, I mean, either way, there's spores everywhere. But
Mhm.
if your humidity goes up a certain point, you'll see mold just growing out of random things because that's where these microscopic spores landed. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and that's an important point. So yeah, the spores are what start the mold colonies, and the mycotoxins are also not alive. So antifungals don't work on them, which I've been really harping on lately because nobody talks about it, but I love talking about it. Um, so yeah, but they are, the toxins that can go throughout our bodies, throughout our brains, throughout our nervous systems. There is no limit to where mycotoxins can go in your body. They can cross every single barrier because they are ionophores. They can cross into your cells, every single cell throughout your body, your eyes, your heart, your lungs, you know, where we don't want them to go anywhere. So, yeah, mycotoxins are awful. That's so true. Um,
super
so, yeah.
interesting. Super interesting. It's like the
Mhm.
antifungals are attacking the source, but you still have to address the toxins that are left over for an extremely long amount of time.
Yeah, and some people don't even have colonization. Sometimes it's just the toxins. So
Right.
they're just detoxing and they don't have active colonization, or sometimes we get the colonization that we're doing a detox protocol, but we're also then doing a colonization protocol, but then we go back and we're like, oh, that colonization left some toxins, but the colonization is gone, and now we have to do another or more detox for the toxins that it left behind. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
sometimes it can take some
definitely
time.
same for the homes, for sure. I've seen people who have they've literally gotten rid of all the mold. Like it's hard, but you can, or find 99% of the mold, but you still have a leftover issue,
Mm-hmm.
which is the toxins, or there still could
Oh,
be spores. And one of the biggest issues after a remediation is that the spores kind of go airborne. And I think it's similar when you're detoxing the body, right? That
mm-hmm.
the toxins will sort of come out and then you have to do something with them, or else you could even have like a reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you start, and that's why I really harp on the order of things too, because if you start with, a bunch of like IV whatever, or, a ton of glutathione or like tons of binders, then it's just not the right order and your body is not going to respond well to it. So you have to like boost up the body's defenses before you go that route. So, and you guys probably all have checked that out in my book and on my page, but if not,
Yep. By the
there you go.
way, by the way, Conquering
Oh
Mold,
yeah. Awesome.
amazing,
Yeah.
must read,
Yeah, and
must
you
read book.
must visualize the mold photos by the photographer and videographer himself.
Yes, thank you for including me. I love the book. I appreciate
Absolutely,
you
absolutely.
for
It's
including me.
the only
But it,
mold book published that has photos of actual mold. Newsflash, everyone.
yeah,
A
and
mold
I
book
think
should
it's
have mold.
so important to have like, someone like yourself, a medical professional involved, because I see so many people dealing with mold who take advice from Facebook groups and things like, people who aren't necessarily, medical doctors giving serious medical advice, and even mold advice for your home, some of which is like, you got to do testing that takes 3 months in your home, whereas we want to help you even if you're still in the mold, right? We still want to help
Yep,
you reduce your exposure
absolutely.
and the toxic burden.
Yeah, we have a resource that we made together called What to Do in a Moldy Environment. So if you guys don't have that, make sure you get it. So
Yeah,
on my
and
page.
I just put it in the comments here. Someone asked about a air purifier, and I always talk about HEPA. I'm not a big brand guy. If any of the brands are watching and they want me to partner up, we can talk. But it has to be a HEPA, at a minimum. It's not going to kill the mold. It's not going to get rid of your mold problem. It's going to maybe help to reduce your exposure temporarily, but at a certain point, you're filling this HEPA machine up with mold spores. Now you kind of have an issue where the machine can become contaminated. So you really want to remediate and then get yourself the good air filters. But some people can't take immediate action.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'd love to answer Jared's question, by the way, Birch Bear Holistic Care.
Yeah.
We're excited to have you
He's about
on.
to
Thanks
come
for
on.
being here.
Yeah.
So for me, the candles, I've seen a lot of videos where it possibly helps with the airborne counts. I'd like to see, I think there's issues with the way they do the testing, but it's one thing to address what's in the air currently. Like there's a few ways you can clean your air quickly. I don't know if a candle is the best way to clean your air, if you think about it, as far as soot and ash, but there's a lot of ways to temporarily put a band-aid, but you really want to address the moisture issues. And
Yeah.
personally, I'm not big on the candle issue.
I
The
know. Yeah.
candle,
Fun
especially
fact,
like
every time I want to buy a
yeah,
candle because they come up on my feed, I send it to Jonathan and he convinces me not to buy a candle. So thank you for that.
yeah. Well, I have seen stories where people are helped, and anything can probably help you in a short term. If it's gonna clean your air, or maybe even change just your air
Or smell good.
composition. Um, so Lounge, I would definitely recommend you having air purifier at all times, not just when the mold is gone. But the problem is you can contaminate the machine. So you want to start with a clean HEPA, and then whether or not you want to bring that HEPA with you or reuse the HEPA, is depending on a lot of things like your sensitivity. But I would definitely be changing your filters. If you're going from a moldy environment to a clean environment, change the filters. Um,
Absolutely.
if you're going to a
Absolutely.
hotel or an Airbnb for a week or a month to heal, I think you should have a HEPA air purifier or have a few of them. Maybe keep the receipt and, maybe you want to return it the next week, but you want to be
We did
healthy. You
not
want
tell you to do
to,
that.
well, you want to have clean air. Whether or not you're in love with the brand is another thing. Um, but I
Fair point. Fair
always,
point.
I
Okay.
always think air
Oh
purifier.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, clean air is paramount with mold. So we want to answer the questions, but we do have timeline of guests here. So I'm going to bring Jared on since he is here. So let's see if
And by the
that
way,
works.
we are doing a giveaway of a HEPA air purifier
Oh,
right after this
oh,
live. Hey, Jared,
awesome.
Hey, everybody.
Okay. Yes. All
how
right.
you doing?
So
Well,
let me intro Jared. So joining us now, who is here? We have a guest whose holistic health journey was kickstarted by mold. After he reached over 300 pounds by January 2023, with his immune system shutting down and his wife getting diagnosed with epilepsy with no root cause given, they had to take matters into their own hands to heal. I think we can all relate to that. Now sitting at 100 plus pounds lighter, whose wife is now a year plus seizure free, here is Jared Birch of Birch Bear Holistic Care. So thank you for joining us.
thank you for having me. It's an honor being on here. This is awesome.
This is great. Yeah. So I know you had a really cool story to share. Well, that was a really cool story in and of itself, but about your mold experience, right?
It was a wild experience that we thought was dust. So I'm sure a lot of people can
Yeah.
relate to this one, but we were living in Aspergillus niger that we thought was just dust for 4 years. And it took about 2 years for symptoms to really start to come on, and year three to figure out, oh, it's mold. But in the meantime, ochratoxin A from that mold specifically got in my thyroid. I wish I could put pictures up, but I literally got shingles on my left eye, vid back to back. I had no immune system. My hairline was pulling back and receding fast. I was over 300 pounds. Living in mold, got burned and healed with fungal infection that I'm healing up from the burns from living in mold. And wife ended up with epilepsy, MCAS, POTS, mast cell activation syndrome, all of these symptoms that were symptoms of the root, and we found the root through a functional medicine doctor that mentioned it possibly could be mold. And we had her to leave the house for 90 days. And for 90 days, zero seizures.
Wow.
She came back into the house and within 48 hours had a seizure. And it was a nocturnal one. And it was at that point we're like, okay, there's something in our terrain, in our environment that's triggering it for her. And come to find out, our air handling system, our AC, was riddled with mold. And she was in the house 24 hours a day. I was leaving the house 12 hours a day. So my wife was in it a lot more than I was, and she's more susceptible to mold than I am. So her symptoms were way worse than mine. But that's what made us realize, okay, there's something in the environment because she's not having seizures while being out of the home, but in the home she was having them. So that was a fun one to figure
Oh,
out personally.
oh, wow.
Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's so key, when you realize that something is happening in the environment that's not happening in other places.
mhm.
Especially when it's something so severe like a seizure, that, had to be just, traumatizing every time in the middle of the night too. It's so scary. But,
Yeah, and I think part of it was a lack of oxygen too, because that can deprive your body of oxygen, especially
yeah.
living in a latent environment like we were. But where I feel a lot of people get stuck is I'm not having symptoms, but they are. Or
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
having all these symptoms and my husband's fine. I must be crazy. And that's a
Yeah.
big point of, I feel like people miss the mark because of that most of the time. They get stuck there. Going, it's in your
Mhm.
head. It's all in your head. You're fine. You're not sick. You need to go talk to a therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see it all the time, especially like a majority of, I think we've seen a lot of the people who are affected are women in a majority. But a lot of my clients, for example, some of them are even wives who have had to go behind their husband's back because it's to a point where they've even hired they've hired five pros already. Nobody could find the mold, and sometimes it would be like, this woman who hired me behind her husband's back. There was these paintings she had brought from Peru on like a boat along with some other stuff, and
Oh,
it's little white. It almost looks like part of the painting because it looks so natural, but it can be white dust, or it's really hard to tell the difference between dust and mold. And you have so many different types. You mentioned Aspergillus niger. That's
mhm.
literally like translates basically. I think it's one of the black molds,
Yeah.
but it's not the black mold that
Yeah.
everyone talks about,
Yeah.
but there really is no, black mold. But it's the little things in a house, like even if it is just dust, you have to ask yourself, why is there dust? Is the air being filtered
Right.
properly? Are we cleaning enough? And if you find an AC where it's not being filtered perfectly, usually you find buildup in the AC. Next thing you know, there's a moisture problem. Now you have mold in the AC. So there's always little clues. That's
Mm.
why we say just be as clean as, clean
We're all gonna
surfaces, clean
clean
air.
after this.
Yeah.
Right. I'm thinking of my house. Okay, where's every piece of dust I've
Yeah,
seen?
yeah, yeah.
Because it ends up
Yeah,
as a trap. I mean, that's what people don't realize. You leave dust, and that ends up as a trap for
yeah.
the mold spores and spreads it and allows it to take hold in the home even
It's
more so.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's true. And yeah, genetics does play a part, but it's also
Yeah.
other factors too, because it's not just genetics, which I love to hear about because it's like, how is your gut? Because anyone who has underlying gut issues and goes into a moldy environment, they are gonna get, destroyed by the mold so much more easily
Yep.
than someone who has a really resilient gut microbiome. So, and I know you get, you talk about that on your page too, the microbiome. And, how is your nervous system? Right? So, whatever mold likes to attack whatever you're susceptible to. So, I was just susceptible to like mental health issues. So it just, rocked that, so it's like whatever your weakest link, mold will take advantage of. And, it could be different for everyone in a family. So yeah, I think that's a very, very important point. And, we will continue to preach that. And I think that's really poignant. Yeah, especially with, again, severe symptoms
Yeah.
or something that, so I'm curious. So for the seizures, so I'm guessing you probably were in, did you go to the hospital for seizures
Oh
sometime and
yeah.
they, didn't do any, they probably had no,
They had
mold
no
was not on their list,
they
right?
had no help.
Yeah.
We went to we did a VEEG as well at home, so she had a full 3 day
Wow.
scan of her brain to see if there's any sort of activity for seizure activity, and she had
Mhm.
none. Well, she had that on her head.
Yeah.
And her neurologist left it saying that 70% of seizures go undiagnosed as to the root cause. And when I mentioned it could be mold, he straight up said mold does not cause seizures. Straight up said that to me. And I had to explain to him how it can disrupt our GABA and disrupt a lot of
Well,
things. It's a
hopefully
pro
this will do.
inflammatory.
Yeah.
He Googled it and found out that Dr. Google said yes.
Oh,
So he then agreed with me. That could be
oh,
mold.
special.
I, I
Yeah,
love
that
the Western
happens all too
medicine that we're
frequently.
in. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, especially in medicine, but people say mold this, mold that. But which mold are we talking about in general? Because there's obviously hundreds and thousands of different species. So,
Right.
there's probably, I think there's 100 kinds of Aspergillus alone or more. It's like, what are we even talking about? And then if you have mold in your home, you can also assume there's probably a bacteria issue. I
Yeah.
see pest issues all the time, and they all
Hmm.
kind of play into each
Oh yeah.
other. So it's not
Cockroaches
it's
going
not
along with that
always
often.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not always, A to B, but there's steps in between where you're sick either way. It's related to the building,
Mm-hmm.
and you really got to get professionals in there.
Yeah,
Um,
leaky gut and leaky brain too
Oh yeah.
can
See, I,
be the
I
case.
was I was diagnosed at 12 with leaky gut, so I was kind of started off my life with that.
Yeah.
But in that house, so when we were there for 4 years, what finally kicked me over the edge was a heavy round of antibiotics.
Oh,
After I got put
yeah.
on a heavy round of antibiotics in that house,
There you
my
go.
system was wiped, and that's when I went from 270 to over 300 pounds from the end of 2022 to beginning of 2023. got shingles, got COVID back to back, like immune system gone, and mold finally had its
Yeah.
freedom. My defenses were down, so it had its full freedom to take reign
Yeah.
in my gut.
Oh my goodness. This is so, so interesting. And I think we'll have to do another live to continue this conversation. So awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing just a brief snippet of your story, Jared, and for joining us for Black Mold Friday.
Thank you.
And we will talk to you sometime soon.
Thank you, Jared.
Appreciate
Good
you
to
having me
see
on.
you.
Appreciate it, guys. Yeah, you as well.
Awesome.
Talk
to you
soon, man.
Let me get it. All right. We are going to get Long Island Mold Guy in here.
Yes.
So,
And shout out to some. I know there's a lot of questions. We'll definitely get to them,
yes,
or message us and we'll definitely get to
we
you.
will.
Cohen's
All right.
Restoration
Hey,
was here,
Cohen's.
and some of the good
Yes.
friends.
Thank
Old
you.
Dog Knows.
Yeah.
Everybody's in here.
Hi. All right. So joining us now, we have Dominic from Long Island, who is certified in mold assessment and remediation, does mostly remediation, and he's the right guy for your fungi. So
How's it
thank you for
going,
joining
Dom?
us, Long Island Mold Guy. So yeah, happy Black Mold Friday.
Happy Friday. I don't know if you can see me.
We can see
Yes,
you.
we can.
Yes.
Looks like you're in the middle of like a blizzard or a snowstorm.
No, I just got home from actually doing a remediation a little while ago, and I got my
Oh,
hoodie on and my house clothes,
okay.
getting comfortable.
Just a
Awesome.
white wall behind you. I thought it was a wall of snow for a second.
Yep.
It's
Nah.
Long Island. You
Yeah.
never know.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. How was the remediation?
It was good. I actually commented in the middle of that because you mentioned having family over for the holidays, and the particular family we were doing a remediation for this week. We took off for Thanksgiving, but while we took off, they had people in the house that were actually doing a remediation in on two different levels. Thankfully, not in the living areas, but still nonetheless a mold remediation going on in the house. So I thought that
Wow.
was kind of odd, you know. They want, I mean, you know, some people, do they care? Do they didn't care? Inviting people over while something like this is going on is definitely a little strange.
True.
Yep.
Yeah. Thoughts
Um,
on that, Jonathan?
no, I mean, I just, again, the importance of bringing in a professional and not doing this on your own. You don't want to find out what the symptoms are or find out the next symptom on the list. You want to avoid it from step one and bring in someone like Dom who, in a place like New York, there's so many people who I'm sure will come in and rip your place apart and screw you up big time. You really need to bring in the pros. And we talk a lot about health, Dom. I'm wondering if you have seen, with your clients, a lot of sickness, and maybe after a crappy remediation, they get way sicker, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. Before and after, I deal with a lot of clients that are suffering from mold illness, and again, people that don't want to help them. They'll go see a medical doctor, and they get brushed off. And you also mentioned the non-believing spouse. I see a lot of that as well, and arguments ensue. One doesn't believe another, and I'm kind of also like not just a remediator, but a mediator. And I'm, talking through and calming people down and, saying let's work together and support each other and get through what this is and let's get to the other end of it, let's not argue because that's not going to solve anything. But yes, definitely see a lot of people with health issues.
Yeah, that's so important. I think that you brought up. I like that, not just a remediator, a mediator, and I think we all of us here do that a lot. And it's just so important to have that impartial party, and people who know the fact that mold can affect people differently, and the fact that it's affecting their nervous system, and they're foggy, and they're not making rational decisions. And mold, I think, has affected all of us before too, and so we can relate because we've been there. And yeah, definitely could share more stories on that. But
Right. Absolutely, absolutely. There's always stories to go around in this line of work, and
Always
you
in
have to
mold.
be.
If you bring up mold anywhere, people always have a
Yep.
story. You know, if I carry the book around, it's like, oh, mold. Ah, I have a story about mold, right? Yeah.
And you have to be compassionate in this line of work, and that's what I find when dealing with clients, and because there's just so much going on, people are usually overwhelmed, again, sick. So if you don't have compassion for the people and willing to help the people, then it's more than likely probably not the field for you. I believe, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah,
Very true.
it's tricky, especially dealing with people who are currently living in it, and it's something very sensitive for people. And I've heard a lot lately about it's coming between people's marriages, and a lot of the people who are in mold, they're not motivated because the mold has really kind of this mold hold on them.
Mold
I think
hold.
we'll trademark that one.
Yeah.
But you don't have a lot of people. I try to be very attentive with my clients, and even some people who haven't called me back right away, but I know they're in a bad situation, I'll just send another text. And a lot of them are like, I completely forgot, or, oh, someone's ripping apart my kitchen right now. And it's like, well, you might want to protect yourself immediately. Um, so it's very important to be not disappearing on people, be there for them. Sometimes it just
No,
takes
I'm
one.
big on
Yeah.
communicating. Even if that person doesn't become my client, I'm still there for them, and I'll communicate with them, answer their questions. Text me anytime you want. I'll tell you how to clean something, work through something. I'll cry with you.
Mm. Been
Whatever,
there.
whatever it
Yep.
takes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
a lot of the mold exposed community, they need just someone to lean on, or
Yeah.
just one person to be like,
Absolutely.
"Hey, maybe mold is the answer. Maybe." Even a maybe goes a long way for people, because everyone's just like, "There's no mold here. There's absolutely zero chance. You're effing nuts." Pardon my French here on Instagram. I know, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Right.
sometimes just a word of
Yeah.
encouragement, or is all it takes to lead someone down a path of healing. So I think that's great.
Yeah. You got
And
to bring the
awesome,
positivity.
yeah, awesome hoodie, by the way. I love
Oh,
the
thank you.
marketing.
That's
I'm gonna
great.
need
Yeah,
one.
I love
Thank
that. Yeah, no, and I think that's also why, it's great that we're all together in a community too, because, I know it's important for us to stay, built up to and be able to continue to give that compassion and care and just you don't always find that with every mold professional.
you.
So the fact that you guys are like that, I think I just need to underscore it's very, unique and very, you don't find that very often. So I appreciate you guys, being in my circle of friends and in a community that we can, help people, together.
Yeah. I
So
even tried to get a customer to talk to you, and they thought I was being sarcastic because I was like, I know a doctor that might be able to help you. What are you being sarcastic? I was like, no, seriously. I was like, it's actually a doctor that knows so much about mold and cares about mold. She never took the step to
right.
do so and talk to you, but at first she thought I was being sarcastic when I mentioned I know
Yeah,
a
I'm kind of
doctor. A
in a
doctor.
unique place. Most of my community on here are not, big fans of doctors, understandably, and I totally, I would be very sensitive to that because I've been, there in the regular medical system, and they were not receptive of me doing mold there either. So it's like
Of
I
course.
know, I know how
Yeah.
that is.
You're
So.
speaking the truth.
Yeah, we got to speak the truth in love, but speak the truth nonetheless.
It's just a matter of
So,
finding the right doctor that works with you, and and has faith, and you have faith in them, and you'll
mhm.
find a person can find the right doctor if they do their research.
Yeah,
Yeah,
very true.
Yep.
It's just as important as, keeping up with the science is very, very important, but if you don't care about people, then it doesn't really matter.
No, yeah, that's the number one qualification. You have to care. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so, but speaking of kind of your expertise, just for another minute that we have, so anything that you guys do to keep it? So how do you keep that area sealed off or whatever whenever people are gathering in that home that has remediation going
Well,
on?
again,
I don't know.
thankfully in this house, the areas we're working on are two attic areas
Okay.
and a crawl space area.
Okay.
So they're
Interesting.
away from, eyes view, but we
Mm-hmm.
still have to set up containment.
Mm-hmm.
The attic, again, a big full wall containment around the attic so that we not only can get into the attic, but have some space coming in and out to take
Mm-hmm.
our PPE off and get our equipment wiped down. And the same
Yeah.
thing down in the basement. While they do have a living space down there, we were able to close off a section away from where they were so we can access that crawl space.
Awesome.
But that's it's all in the prep, containment,
Cool.
containment, containment, and protection and cleaning. Always vacuuming and the HEPA air scrubbers. Always going, even when we have to sweep, like after demo, I make sure everybody's with the mist bottles, and getting the mist over the dust to keep the dust down. And I don't want, always damp sweeping. So anything we can do to maintain dust control is basically always happening.
Love
Great.
it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us
Yeah, thanks for
and
having
for your
me. I
insights.
appreciate it.
Thank you,
Very cool.
And
Don. Appreciate it.
we'll talk with you
Yeah,
soon.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna see if Melrose is in here. I don't think he's in the room right now, but we can see. We can chat until we see him join. We can share it with him.
Yeah, I just sent him everybody
Perfect.
go send Andrew Melrose a message. But
Melrose Mold Solutions.
yeah, but it's great, and thank you to all the guests. But it's great to see professionals who actually show up and listen. And I think someone commented there's no one size fits all for any of this.
Oh,
But
preach.
just having someone that listens is literally half the battle. Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's being a doctor or a mold assessor or mediator, like you have to listen to your clients, and you'll never get to the desired outcome if you're not listening and supportive and
Absolutely. Yes.
things
Yes.
like
All
that.
right. So Andrew Melrose is going to join us. He's a mold and indoor environmental specialist. Awesome. He's an inspector and he
Hey,
also
hey,
does virtual coaching. Thank you for joining us.
how's it going? Good to see you
What's
all.
up,
Good to see you
Happy
Andrew?
too.
Thanksgiving.
Happy
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Happy
How was
Black
it?
Mold Friday.
Yes,
Friday.
that's right.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks for coming on. And I know that you wanted to share some tips for homeowners or anything that you want to share in particular.
Yeah, I don't want to like regurgitate much of what has already been shared. I'm curious real quick from you guys, like what has been shared, because I was just able to hop on now and you guys have been going since 7. So what's like some of the best takeaways you've had so far?
Do you want to?
Lots of stuff. So
It's
we
been a lot.
had, a lot of talk about, I think we just had a really good conversation about there's no one size fits all for a doctor or a mold test or a mold remediation, but having someone who actually genuinely listens to you and wants to help and asks the right questions and is compassionate
Yeah,
is so important in this industry. We both do virtual coaching, and I know a lot of my clients, it's like these people are on the verge of mental and physical like collapse.
yeah,
So they really need someone to help, and we've built a wonderful community of these people, so I'm so glad you could make it.
yeah. Thank you guys for inviting. This is definitely what's needed. I mean, we're in an industry that there's a huge need and a need for people who, like you said, know all this stuff and really care. And I think that it's going to be a very common thing that homeowners are getting assessments and involving people who understand environmental health to really do this stuff. But a big passion of mine is educating the homeowners, because there's been so many inspections, and you probably know as well, where you walk in and within 5-10 minutes, you're like, oh, the homeowner could have already known this themselves. And then they would maybe already be further down the process. Now, I'm very happy to be there and I help them go there. But some of this stuff is like, if we just had awareness and knew that, hey, when that leaked, to be on top of it, quicker and really dry it out fully. If when that flood happened, don't try to like deal with it yourself. Really get it fully dried to dry standard. Remove the materials you need to. Check your HVAC system, and if your HVAC professional comes over to do a maintenance, like get a before and after photo. We have amazing technology these days. Just ask your HVAC professional, hey, if you're going to do a tune-up on my system, please open up the handler, take photos, and show me what it's looking like in there. Something that simple. I have countless stories of how that one move has been the determination of a lot of issues in the home, and the fixing it has changed people's health. Literally, just that one thing is the HVAC system. So, the more that homeowners can be aware of this, then we're already further down the road. And then if the homeowner's like, hey, I really don't know, but I do have this funky smell here, or ever since we moved in the home, we've had this, and they start going to their limit, then you bring in a professional, and now we all have much more data. So what can homeowners be looking for? First off, like I said, if there's a water leak, current or previous, to get on top of that ASAP. Not allow mold to grow, because it doesn't just grow just because. It needs a certain environment. Mold is like a plant, so there's certain environments conducive for mold growth to happen. And if homeowners can get on top of water leaks, that's a big one. And then chronic elevated humidity can also be an issue. High dust content, just dark, damp, stale air is not healthy air. So some of those basics are in my mold safe home habits, which is like a very simple 8-page write-up that you guys can all download for free. And these are just some of the habits that homeowners can have. And then it's about vetting professionals who are going to take their time. I think that's the main thing when it comes to a mold assessor, is like, please just don't let someone walk into your house for $500-600 and be out in 20 minutes and they didn't really check around. Everything on my page and our pages and everything from this live alone would probably give you more information than a 20-minute walkthrough and a random air test in the center of a room with a false negative. Home inspectors might have really good things that they're doing, but if they just slap the word mold on their process and they just do a random single air test, that's not a full mold assessment either. So little things like this can really help us save a lot of stress, confusion, false negatives, all that. And I just want to say what I'm most passionate about is seeing people happy and healthy. I know the issues that mold can cause in the body. I've personally experienced it. I will have a piece of content coming out in a week or two about my current levels of a my MycoLab blood serum analysis, where right now, currently, I have very high levels on at least that lab and what it showed. And so looking at that, but not being emotionally charged by it, but saying, okay, I, like anything in life, have to maintain, heal, and improve with anything, with our workouts, with our businesses. We're always on a growth trajectory, right? And so if we look at a mold test or any test and absolutely lock down a belief that I'm ruined now, I'm sick, I'm never going to get through it, that's not going to help us actually grow.
Yeah.
This should be just a data point that we look at objectively and say, that's where I'm at. It's like taking your temperature. Now what do I do? And that's why we're getting the information out there, so we can empower people with solutions. Because if you feel like I got a mold test and I have no solution, of course you're going to have much more stress. So it's just looking at it and knowing that there is a process. Let's take it one step at a time. Keep very optimistic approach. I like that about you guys, and let's just apply the solutions that way. So I know the severity of it. I've been in homes that are very moldy. I feel like I hit by a truck sometimes when I drive away after doing the assessment. I really know all of that, but I do know that this is fixable, and we really can get to some answers.
Super
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I know I always call my plans with people action plans, because it's like everything is an action step. There's always an action step you can take, no matter how small, and no matter what you think, oh, this isn't going to do anything. It's like everything you do is an action step, one
That's
way or the
right.
other.
That's right.
So it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I tell people, a lot of people when they hear they have mold, they freeze up at that point, and they're
Yep.
like, well, remediation won't go right, and I can't go anywhere. There's nowhere to go. They're like completely
Mhm.
hopeless. But I'm telling them, like, one step at a time. There is action steps. First, you gotta
Deep
get
breath.
to a clean environment, breathe some fresh
Absolutely.
air, even go outside, just to even think straight. Because you're about to make a big decision. Am I gonna move? Am I gonna go to a doctor?
Mhm.
Like, some people mold investing is not your next best option. Maybe you're very
That's
financially
right.
limited and all you can afford is, maybe a HEPA at the time, or, there's always a different protocol.
Yeah.
But it's definitely important to, and especially taking small action steps, a little action every day obviously adds up to, a bigger action for the week.
Yes.
Yeah,
Super important.
that's my little journals that I give my clients. It says taking action every day. I'm glad I have one of those right here.
That's awesome.
Case in point.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like go outside and take a deep breath. I know I always say take a deep breath, and I'm like, go outside and do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
in a molding environment, guys. Not
Exactly.
no.
And along that track, like, there is a beautiful thing that happens once we kind of get through that initial storm of, um, okay, mold's in the house, got to handle it. Let's just pretend that we got through the mold timeline. By the way, go on my Instagram page. There's a mold timeline. I'm going to be posting more about that. It's a beautiful template of just how to conceptualize and visualize the process of going through mold. Like, where do these steps fit in? Don't do this before this, and just how do we progress through and actually get it done? Once we're there, though, we can look back at this time rather than just a horror story that absolutely traumatized us and then we just define it as that. And we can look at it as like, this was a catalyst for growth. Like, if it did move you to a new home, what if a whole new chapter in life opens up and you meet new friends and have a whole new, and it was like mold came as like a storm or like a hardship, but it actually turned to be a beautiful next new chapter. For someone else, maybe it's like, we didn't even know that this was happening in the house. It made a lot of kind of aha moments. Now we shifted our eating habits, our health habits, our sleep habits, all this stuff because we did test and remediate our home. And now our current home that we wanted to be our dream home stayed that way. And we have a whole new way of life. And then think about this. If we are just getting on the healing process now and being intentional and taking responsibility and ownership for our life and our health and not outsourcing all the time, you're literally going to be saving your health for 20 years down the road. Because I think mold's accumulative effect is actually what, I mean, we all have the acute symptoms of like, the sneezing or the, brain fog that hits us and whatever it might be. That's the body speaking to us via a symptom. But that long-term, slow bleed, if you want to call it that, turns into long-term chronic stuff 20 years out. So we can get actually really thankful that this stuff comes up to be a catalyst of growth. And I have so many stories, I'll share more, of how people who they went through mold, then they turned the corner and they started helping someone else with it, or they started giving their knowledge away. And this is also a key. Be careful who you listen to, because if their trauma is still coming through really, really, really strong, you might get decent information, but it's going to come on a resonance of, now you're under the mold in fear as well, and now you're adopting their horror story as yours and taking on trauma that really you could have looked at again objectively. So how we input information both visually and through our ears and take it in is so important. So we can have a great post with all good information, but just look at it objectively. Just look at it and just observe it before you absorb it is what I try to tell people, because you have your own life story, you have your own purpose, and if you're taking in information, you need to apply it in your own way. And so there really is hope. There's like a purpose and a learning on the other side of this. I'm going to have a lot more content coming out about that very topic.
Love that.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Definitely
Yeah.
got to be like a life coach or something. I think a lot of
Thank you,
us
man.
end up, like we said, going in that direction because it's a whole lifestyle. Like it's
It
That's
is,
half
man.
of what we
This is
do
life.
in our field. Yeah. Yeah. It's great. So true. Yeah. The state of the nervous system really, really, really definitely
Yeah.
matters. And as we said before, mold, learning about mold is a blessing so that we
Yeah.
can, learn from it and help others with it. So
For sure. We've had so many questions. I'm so sorry, all the commenters. I've been missing these these comments, but
yeah,
love the
no worries.
engagement. This is
Yeah.
great.
And Instagram is actually going to cut us off soon too, but,
Oh, really? Well, this
um,
is a like beautiful idea you guys have had, and I love it. I think it needs to
me
happen
too, man.
again, and you guys are
Yeah.
great. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
thank you.
Awesome. But thanks for coming on. Yeah, and I think we're just gonna chat for a couple more minutes and then
Rock and
wrap it
Thank
roll.
you,
up. But
So good to
Andrew.
see you
Good to see you
guys.
thanks,
again.
Yeah.
Andrew. Good to
Happy
see
Black
you.
Gold Friday,
Talk to
guys.
you
Yes.
soon.
Yes, sir.
Happy Black Hole Friday.
Happy
Okay.
holidays.
Yes.
Bye.
Yes, you too. Bye.
All right. Do we want to see any chats? Did you want
Yeah, time flies when you are talking mold,
to?
as always.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, anything that you picked up from the chat that we want to hit, we want to answer all of your questions in detail. We don't have time here, but either message us, put them in the comment sections. If you're comfortable doing that, that's a great way to do it. And then everyone can learn. But if it's more personal, you want to message us for sure. We can help you. We are, of course, as you can see evidence here, building a network of mold professionals, so that anywhere you are, we can help you find someone local. Whereas, we do virtual, nationwide and beyond. So,
Yeah. And I do see a lot of stuff in the chat. Seems like a lot of airborne mold spores, a lot of mold issues that people are stuck in, unfortunately. The landlord issue, a lot of the time that comes back to an attorney. When you're renting, a lot of the times you need legal help. Sometimes you can get bullied and whatnot, but if you guys are in a moldy environment, there's spores in the air, even if there's just mold on the surfaces, there's still mold exposure. And I think we're both really big on reducing your exposure. There's not always, sometimes your options are very limited and it takes some time to make that next step, but there's always reducing exposure, getting fresh air. And people talk about the nervous system here, which I think you can obviously probably back up medically, but just deep breathing. And I know you've posted some great nervous system
oh yeah.
stuff.
If you guys want nervous system, I have a whole highlight on here on nervous system, the basic nervous system exercise when you can get out of fight or flight in 30 seconds or less. So go
Yeah,
check
and
it out.
so important to get into the state of mind where you can make a decision,
Yep.
a controlled decision. Because I think we all know when something that you weren't expecting, or you start kind of panicking, how do I get out of this? But you can't plan if you're panicked.
So true.
And
Yeah.
I've seen
Yeah.
some groups and Facebook groups and things like that where they're like, you have to panic or else you're never gonna get out. But I think we've seen that
Oh,
panic can slow you down a lot of the time. You can make a hire a panic contractor and you end up with panic results, and you're back to square one.
yeah. If you're in fight or flight, anything I try to do will just bounce off. It just doesn't work, and I've seen it before, and so I harp on it a lot. But it's with the best intentions. So it's like I'm not your. Well, I am kind of your friend, guys, but I'm also your doctor, so I have to tell you how it is sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm with Rashida. Like some of these groups I see, I mean, it's sad because there's so many people that need help, and I know I can't possibly help everyone, but
I know, and you are
yeah.
so good at like helping so many people in those groups, and sometimes I just say too much, and then
Yeah. Well, I try. I know we both try, but so many people, not only do they need help, but there's people giving them backwards information. And I think
yep,
you really should take it from an expert. Not necessarily everyone is not an expert, especially with medical things and finding moisture in a home. Like these are complex sciences.
yeah,
The home and the body are both very complex. It's not
absolutely.
just air testing, not just urine mycotoxin testing. It's
Yeah, you wanna hear or feel how complex mold is. Try to write a book on it, and then you really have to
yeah,
realize that you really have to know it upside down and backwards because you're gonna like actually put your name on it, right?
yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, but it's like we've been saying, once you learn it, it's like let's help as many people as we can. It's smooth
absolutely.
sailing from there. Um,
Absolutely. Awesome. So, okay, Black Mold Friday. Um, this has been amazing. And we're going to go over to the other platform that we started on now. But
yes,
the book is
TikTok. Can
called
I say that?
Conquering Mold.
Can we not
It's
say
all
that?
over my page.
Well, just for in case anyone is watching, we're moving over to TikTok. I'm Mold Assessor here on Instagram, the Detox Doc obviously on Instagram and TikTok, and I am mold testing on TikTok. So we'll be over there to continue the fun.
Wonderful. All right.
And by the way, real quick, we do have our giveaway post up. So if you want to be entered in the HEPA filter, dehumidifier, water bottle, I think the mold book, enter the giveaway. It's on our post. And there's also the Great Conquering Mold book. Don't forget, we both got it. Awesome.
All right. See you soon.
Okay, cool.